Roughly 45% of those making more than $100,000 per year say they live paycheck to paycheck. 1/3 of lottery winners go bankrupt within 3 to 5 years. 78% of former NFL players and 60% of NBA players face serious financial difficulties within 2 years of retirement. All your dreams came true, but now what? The hardest part is knowing what you should do with the wealth that you've accumulated or suddenly found yourself having. I'm Terrell Higgins, and I was able to achieve millionaire status in my mid-30s with a combination of real estate and stock investing. And today, I'm going to be giving you a peek behind the curtain of strategies that the ultra wealthy and high income earners use to preserve their wealth, get cool stuff, and save money in the process. Let's get into it. On March 10th, 2023, Silicon Valley Bank failed after a large run on the bank. This made it the third largest bank collapse in US history, and 89% of Silicon Valley Bank's $172 billion in deposits was not FDIC insured. If the FDIC didn't get special authority from the Treasury to make Silicon Valley Bank's customers whole, they would have lost billions and billions of dollars. But if you use CDARS, Certificate of Deposit Account Registry Services, they'll actually take any money that you have in an account above the insured FDIC amount and spread it across other accounts. So you can optimize the interest rate that you're getting on your deposits because they'll put them in higher interest rate accounts. And you can ensure that all the money that you have deposited in the bank for your business or personal finances is insured by the FDIC. So how much did you have in cash anyway? So a wealthy person's portfolio looks something like this. They hold about 10% of their portfolio in cash, and that 10% is 6 months of emergency funds. Anything that you hold beyond about 6 months of emergency funds is going to get eaten away by inflation. And then you want about 10% in real estate. So that 10% in real estate can fluctuate depending on what asset class that you actually like. But most people stick to about 10% of their portfolio being in real estate just because it takes a lot of capital to save up the down payments on a property. And people don't like to deal with the management that's required on real estate investments. 70% of their portfolio is in long-term investments. Usually this is an index fund that traditionally tracks the S&P 500, and you get very solid returns with an S&P 500 index fund. On average, you can expect about a 10% return every year from an S&P 500 index fund. And the S&P 500 is actually the benchmark at which all other investments are compared to. So this is the bulk of people's investments. And that final 10% of their portfolio mix, they invest in risky investments. So they invest in things that have the potential to outperform the market 100x over what you would normally expect. So this is your business ventures, this is that crypto holding, this is that hot stock tip someone gave you. The wealthy are smart enough to realize that these risky investments may go to zero. So they limit their exposure by keeping it contained to only 10% of their net worth. So the other thing that you can do to limit your exposure is to live like you're only kind of rich.
My daily driver is a Civic Type R.
Shut up.
It's got tech, it's manual, it's
Shut
reliable,
up.
the car is stable at 100.
That's every day. That's what I can catch you on.
Dude, it's a 2020 and it's got a third pedal.
My dog.
And at 145, it's stable. Like, it goes. It's got seats in the back. I can actually pick people up.
You want to keep your month-to-month expenses as low as possible. You don't want to be living at the very edge of what you can afford. So if you've built in a cash surplus for yourself every month, you can use that surplus of cash to try and generate additional income streams. So whether that's buying into real estate or buying into dividend paying stocks or buying into a business, whatever it is, you need to take that excess that you've built up across the month to try and create additional income streams for yourself. So this brings me to a strategy that a lot of the wealthy use to generate income on their holdings. So it is an option strategy where you sell covered calls. So to have an option on a stock, you need to have 100 shares of that stock. And after you have 100 shares of that stock, you can sell an option of it. And you want to sell that option either at the money, so at what it's currently priced at, or slightly out of the money, so above what it's currently priced at. And the closer you set that expiration to what it's currently priced at, the higher the premium is going to be on that stock. So if a stock is trading sideways or trading down, or if you can predict how much it's actually going to go up over a certain time frame, you can bracket your covered call sale to just keep collecting premiums across the year without actually triggering the sell of your stock. And even if you have to sell your stock, you still get the initial value of all the stock at the price you agree upon. So the only real downside is if you have a sudden move to the positive on that stock, and then someone calls your covered call option, you don't get any of the money beyond the strike price that you agreed upon. And you still get the premium, so that offsets some of that potential gain, but there's really not a lot to lose by doing this covered call option strategy. But the major problem with this strategy is that it requires a lot of money to actually execute. So at the time of recording this video, NVIDIA was trading at $124.58. So a single options contract is $12,588. So a 2% premium on this $12,588 is nothing to write home about. So a lot of investors have multiple options contracts. And if you wanted to get 100 options contracts of NVIDIA, that would mean that you have $1.2 million worth of NVIDIA.
Come on now, dog. Come on, man.
And if you don't have that much money sitting around, there is a way you can actually take advantage of this covered call option strategy without investing that much capital. So they've recently started offering covered call ETFs. These ETFs mimic that covered call strategy without the eye-popping price tag of owning millions of dollars of a given company.
My man.
So the NVIDIA covered call ETF, NVDY, it actually has a almost 70% dividend. And there's a Magnificent 7 covered call ETF, YMAG, and their dividend is about 36%. So these ETFs have significant income generation potential. The only real downside that I can see with these ETFs is that they're so new that there's not enough data to see how they will perform in a market downturn. But I know for me, I'm continuing to monitor these ETFs, and it is a portion of my investing strategy. But with any investment, There is the risk of loss, and you should not put money into these things unless you have fully vetted them for yourself. So once you've created the income for yourself, you might consider relocating to a state that has no income taxes. So Wyoming, Washington, South Dakota, Texas, Nevada, Alaska, Florida, all these states have no income tax. And if you're feeling really frisky, you could consider moving to Puerto Rico. So if you live in Puerto Rico for 6 months out of the year, you have an effective tax rate of 0%. And if your business is in Puerto Rico, you have a corporate tax rate of 4%. So there are some caveats that you have to meet in order to get this huge tax savings. And the reason the US offers this is because Puerto Rico is excluded from US tax collection. You have to jump through some hoops, but the payoff is massive. So let's talk about cool stuff. How does unlimited free food and drinks when you travel sound? So if you have an Amex Platinum card, which costs about $495 a year, you have access to their Centurion lounges in most major airports. And in those Centurion lounges, you can order an unlimited amount of food and alcoholic beverages. And if you use that Amex Platinum card on Ubers or United Airlines, Amex will actually give you a $300 credit back on your card. So you've effectively lowered your membership costs to about $200 a year. The only real catch with this is that these Centurion lounges are not in every airport. So you want to check to make sure that one of the airports close to you actually has one of these lounges to see if this benefit is something you can take advantage of. Which brings me to another form of transportation, cars. Let's talk about the Montana LLC registration trick. So if you have an LLC in Montana and you register your vehicles to that LLC, you don't have to pay any sales tax on a new or used car purchase, and the registration costs each year are substantially lower than other parts of the country. And this trick has been getting a lot more use in the last few years, so I wouldn't be surprised if the government takes it away or if they start to pursue people who are using it. But as of now, you can create your Montana LLC, pay no sales tax on new car purchases and used car purchases, and lower your registration costs. So Section 179 of the US tax code, if you buy a vehicle that's over 6,000 pounds and you intend to use it for a business purpose, you can actually deduct the full value of that vehicle in the first year. So there is a huge misconception about how deductions work. Deduction doesn't mean that it's free. You still have to pay for it. That money is still coming out of your pocket. So for a deduction to make sense, your tax liability has to be greater than the deduction that you're trying to take. If you don't have a tax liability that's large enough to be offset by the deduction, then it doesn't make sense to get a very large deduction and you'd just be wasting money. But taking a deduction like this, where you get to choose where your money is going instead of just paying straight taxes, is a very powerful tool. Being able to deduct toward a business cost or a real estate cost, or in this case, a vehicle, instead of paying that same money to Uncle Sam, is something that most wealthy people try and do. So what is considered a business purpose anyway? So if you're going from one client to another client, or if you're performing deliveries for your business, Or if you are renting the vehicle out on a platform like Turo, which is essentially the same as Airbnb, but for vehicles, you can consider that vehicle being used as a business expense. So you might also be wondering, why do rich people always buy jets and yachts? And jets and yachts actually fall in that same section 179 tax exemption. So if you buy a yacht, you can actually take a deduction of up to $500,000 a year for the value of that yacht if you're using that yacht for business purposes. So if you have a multi-million-dollar yacht, you can actually deduct $500,000 of that yacht's value year after year after year until that full value of that yacht is expended. So you might be wondering, how do I claim a yacht or a jet as a business expense? You'd have to put the yacht or jet in a charter. So when you're not using that yacht or jet, it's being rented out to someone else for them to use. So that will offset some of the cost of owning the yacht or jet. You get to use it for business purposes and you get to take the large tax deduction. But like I said, if your tax bill isn't $500,000 or $1 million or multiple millions of dollars, it doesn't make sense to buy these high ticket items because you're just throwing money away. So let's touch on real estate. Eventually, all roads lead to real estate. Is the single most tax advantaged asset in existence. Real estate can produce a ton of income. It appreciates in value and it provides you a ton of tax advantages. So if you own a business, you might consider purchasing the building that your business is located in. And you want to consider doing this for a few reasons. The first is you lock in what the rent is for your business. You are fixing a cost in your business that you can control moving on from that point forward. The other reason you might consider purchasing the building your business is in is because you can have your company pay those expenses, that mortgage, that insurance, any operating costs associated with that building, and all those costs become tax deductible. You can deduct those costs from any income that you're generating in your business, and it's perfectly legal. You also get to take depreciation. So if it is residential real estate, the depreciation is 27 and a half years. And if it's a commercial real estate property, it's 39 years. So you take the full value of the property and then you divide it by 27 and a half or 39. And that amount you can deduct from your taxes every single year. And on commercial real estate, you can actually do cost segregation studies where they will analyze the property, see which portions of the property will depreciate faster than that 39 years. You can actually move that depreciation up so you can take that depreciation sooner. So let's do an example here. Apple has a $5.1 billion headquarters. It is a giant ring completely constructed out of glass and it surrounds a park in the center. There is so much glass in this headquarters that employees were actually walking into the walls and started putting sticky notes on the walls so they wouldn't walk into them. Leave it to Apple to prioritize form over the actual functionality of their building. But anyway, let's assume that they take depreciation on this $5.1 billion headquarters. That is $131 million that they can take as a deduction every single year. And if they do a cost segregation study, they can take even more than that. And we haven't even looked at any of the operating costs associated with the landscaping, the electricity, the cleaning, the maintenance of the property. All these things are tax deductible. This is cheat code status because, as we all know, real estate doesn't actually go down in value. Their $5.1 billion headquarters could be increasing in value over this whole time, and they actually get to deduct that $5.1 billion construction cost from their books over however long it takes to meet that value. So that covers the real estate for my business. And you might be wondering, what about my personal residence? So if you have an apartment complex, you can do the same thing. So imagine you live in the penthouse of your apartment complex and you rent out the other units. It is possible that the operating cost and the depreciation of the property is enough to completely hide the income from the property. Those paper losses are very powerful on large properties. And you can do this same strategy on a duplex or a triplex or a quadplex. So maybe you don't want to share a space with your tenants, but you've been eyeing that vacation home in Florida. So you can actually purchase a vacation home, rent it out on Airbnb, so you can generate income to offset the cost of you operating this property. And these Airbnbs, just like large commercial real estate, you can take the depreciation on them, and it's possible to do a cost segregation study on the Airbnb and drastically pull the depreciation forward so you can take tax deductions today. So the one big caveat for real estate is, in order for you to take the losses from real estate and start applying it to your ordinary income outside of real estate, you need to be considered a real estate professional. So all that is to say, you actually have to be involved in real estate. You need to be an actual real estate professional. And if you are not a real estate professional, there is a loophole for short-term rentals. So if you operate a short-term rental and you do the majority of the management of that short-term rental, you can qualify as a real estate professional while you're still doing your 9-to-5 job. Otherwise, you would actually have to dedicate most of your time to real estate. So if you meet one of these criteria, and usually it's one of the first two, you can be considered a real estate professional, and you can actually start applying some of your real estate losses to offset your ordinary income. So you've purchased the cool stuff, but you want to protect that cool stuff. Most insurance policies cap out at around $1 million of coverage. So if you own things that are more valuable than $1 million, you need to pursue getting umbrella coverage. So an umbrella policy will give you coverage beyond that $1 million threshold. So your assets are protected. And you also want your core documents in order. So you want a will, which explains how your estate should be distributed if you pass, and it specifies who will be responsible for distributing your estate. You also want your advance directives. So it tells people how you want your end-of-life care to be managed. And you want your power of attorney documents. So these documents specify who can do things on your behalf when you are not there. And it is not an all or nothing proposition. You can give limited powers of attorney so people can act on your behalf for medical reasons or act on your behalf for real estate transactions or business transactions, and you can specify that in that documentation. But you want to be careful how much power you give to any one individual.
Remember,
With great power comes great responsibility.
So when you have a bunch of money, you're gonna have a bunch of people approaching you to try and manage your wealth for you. And wealth managers are not an all or nothing proposition. If you use a wealth manager strategically and just give them a portion of your wealth to manage, it can give you access to tax strategies, investments, and other wealth creation strategies that you would not be familiar with. One recurring theme that you might have noticed is that the wealthy purchase assets that produce income or offset a large portion of their tax burden. And I actually detail a strategy called the buy, borrow, die tax strategy that the wealthy use to accumulate assets, live their life, pass it on to their heirs, and pay no taxes. And you guys can feel free to check that out. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.